Mayday, mayday, we've lost both engines.
The twin-engine commuter plane was losing altitude fast over the cornfields when the mayday call crackled through Jacob's radio scanner. 12 passengers, one failing engine, nearest airport 15 miles away. The farmer ran outside and did something that made the pilot think he was losing his mind.
November 347 Charlie, I've got eyes on you from the ground. Former Air Force combat controller, I can talk you down into my field.
Welcome to Tales Unveiled. Let's get started.
Jacob Brennan had been farming his family's 300 acres for 8 years, corn and soybeans. Population of the nearest town, 847. Everyone knew Jacob as the quiet guy who'd come home from the military and never talked about where he'd been or what he'd done. His neighbors thought he was simple, kind but simple. The man who fixed his own tractors, attended church every Sunday, and waved at everyone who drove past. They didn't know about the 12 years in Afghanistan, about the 23rd Special Tactics Squadron, about the 300 aircraft he'd guided into impossible landing zones under enemy fire. Nobody knew. That's how Jacob wanted it. The radio scanner sat on his workshop bench, always on. Old habit. He liked listening to crop dusters and small planes that flew over his property, reminded him of a life he'd left behind, but never quite forgot. Today, it was saving lives. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is November 723 Bravo, Learjet 45, dual engine failure at 6,000 feet, 8 souls on board attempting restart procedures. Jacob dropped his wrench and ran to the window. There, white fuselage with blue striping, banking hard to the left. Both engines dark, no exhaust vapor. The jet was gliding, but Learjets glide like falling rocks. Maybe 3 minutes of altitude left, maybe less. November 723, Bravo, Hutchinson Tower. We copy your mayday. Nearest airport is 15 miles southwest. Emergency equipment is standing by. Jacob already knew they wouldn't make it. That jet was at 5,000 feet now, losing altitude at 2,000 feet per minute. The math was brutal and simple. They had 2.5 minutes before they hit dirt. He grabbed his phone, dialed Hutchinson Tower. It rang twice. Hutchinson Tower. This is Jacob Brennan. I farm 15 miles northeast of your position. I can see the Learjet. It's not making it to you. Sir, we need to keep this line clear. I'm former Air Force, combat controller, 23rd Special Tactics Squadron. I guided C-130s, Pavehawks, F-16s into dirt strips in Afghanistan for 12 years. That jet is coming down in the next 2 minutes, and I've got a harvested cornfield that could save those 8 people if someone will let me try. Silence. Then a different voice. Older command presence. This is Watch Supervisor Collins. What's your call sign? Didn't have one as a civilian, but in theater they called me stone cold because I never cracked under pressure. You saying you can talk down a Learjet onto a dirt field? I'm saying I can talk down anything with wings if the pilot listens, and my field is where I think it is. That aircraft has maybe 90 seconds of altitude. You want to gamble, they make it to pavement, or you want to give them an option? Stand by. Through the window, Jacob watched the Learjet drop below 4,000 feet. The pilot was trying to stretch the glide, trading airspeed for distance, but it wasn't working. The jet was coming down in his county whether anyone liked it or not. The question was whether 8 people walked away or didn't. His workshop radio crackled. November 723, Bravo, this is Hutchinson Tower. We have a ground observer with military aviation experience at your 10 o'clock position. He's offering an emergency landing option on a harvested cornfield. Do you want to attempt? The pilot's response was immediate. Tower, I'll take any option that isn't a cemetery. Stand by. Ground observer. You're cleared to transmit on guard frequency 121.5. Aircraft call sign is November 723 Bravo. Jacob grabbed his handheld aviation radio from the truck, the one he'd kept after leaving the service just in case. He'd never thought just in case would actually come. He keyed the mic. November 723. Bravo, this is Ground Observer Brennan, former combat controller. I have eyes on your aircraft. Confirm you copy me. Ground Observer, this is 723 Bravo. I copy you loud and clear. Please tell me you have good news. I've got a harvested cornfield, half-mile long, flat and clear, oriented east-west. I can guide you in. What's your name, Captain? David Fletcher, 12 years corporate flying. This is officially my worst day. Not going to be your worst day, Captain. We're getting you and your passengers on the ground safe. But I need you to listen to me and trust me. Can you do that? A pause. Ground observer. I'm flying a Learjet 45. This aircraft lands at 120 knots. It needs 3,500 feet of runway. Your cornfield is going to tear my landing gear off. Not if you do exactly what I tell you. I've guided F-16S onto dirt strips in Afghanistan. You're smaller, lighter, and I know every inch of this field we can do this. You've done this before. Over 300 times in combat, never lost an aircraft. Another pause, then, okay, talk me through it. Jacob looked at his field, the one he'd harvested 3 weeks ago, the one he knew better than any runway. He knew where the ground was firmest, where the slight drainage grade would help slow the aircraft, where every rock and divot lived. What's your altitude? 3,200 feet and dropping. Rate of descent, 1,500 feet per minute. Fuel status? Yep. Enough for weight, but not enough to matter if I don't land soon. Passengers secure? Everyone's strapped in. Some crying, some praying, all terrified. Tell them they picked the right day to fly over my farm. Now listen carefully. Look at your 10 o'clock. You see the large rectangular field? Harvested corn stubble. I see it. That's your new runway. Turn to heading 270. That'll line you up east to west with the prevailing wind. Turning to 270. Jacob watched the Learjet bank. The pilot was following instructions. That was good, meant Fletcher was keeping his head despite the terror his passengers were probably expressing loudly. What's your airspeed? 145 knots. Good. You're going to need to bleed that down to 120 before touchdown. The stubble will create friction, more than you're used to, but the ground is firm. Rained 3 days ago, but it's been dry since. Surface will hold you. How do you know that? Because I've been farming this land for 8 years and walking it for 30 years before that. Trust the guy who knows the dirt, Captain. Trusting the guy who knows the dirt, Jacob started jogging toward the center of his field. He needed to see everything, every approach angle, every potential obstacle. Captain, I'm going to walk you through the terrain. East end has a tree line. You need to clear that by at least 50 feet. The field is flat for about 2,000 feet. Then there's a very slight drainage grade that slopes down maybe 2 degrees. That grade will help you slow down. West end has another tree line, but you'll be stopped long before that. How do you know I'll be stopped? Because corn stubble creates way more friction than you think, and because I'm going to position you to use every inch of that field. You're going to hit hard and fast, but you're going to stay intact. Ground observer. This jet isn't designed for unpaved landings. No jet is, but I've seen A-10s land on goat paths and FE-16s set down on dried lake beds. Your Learjet is tougher than you think, and you're better than you think. Now focus. Altitude, 2,000 feet. You're going to be over the tree line at about 500 feet. When you cross it, I want you at 120 knots, nose up, ready to flare. You see the power lines on the south edge? Jesus Christ, yes, I see them. Stay north. Give yourself 300 feet clearance. Wind is west-southwest at 8 knots. You'll feel a quartering crosswind on approach. Adjust for it. How do you know the wind speed? I can see my weather station from here, and I've been farming in this wind my whole life. Trust me. Fletcher's voice was steadier now. Combat focus was kicking in. The pilot was accepting his situation and adapting. Altitude 1,500 feet, configuring for landing. Flaps. Full. Landing gear? Deploying now. Jacob heard the strain in Fletcher's voice. Every pilot knew what deploying landing gear meant. Commitment. No going around, no second chances. You're committed now, Captain, but that's okay. This is happening, and we're ready for it. Easy for you to say from the ground. I was in a helicopter that lost both engines over Helmand Province in 2012. We auto-rotated into a field while taking small arms fire. My pilot kept his head, followed his training, and all 4 of us walked away. You're going to do the same thing. Were you scared? Terrified, but I trusted my pilot, and he trusted his training. Now you're the pilot, and I'm the guy talking you through it. Your passengers are trusting you the same way I trusted him. Okay. Altitude 1,000 feet. I have the tree line visual. Jacob could see the jet clearly now, landing gear down, flaps extended, looking far too large and fast for his cornfield. The passengers had to be losing their minds. Some of them were probably recording this on their phones, thinking these were their last moments. They were wrong. Jacob wouldn't allow it. Captain, talk to me about your passengers. What have you got back there? Corporate charter. 6 business executives, 1 assistant, 1... Fletcher's voice caught. 1 is Dr. Rachel Stern. She's a heart transplant surgeon. She's racing to Denver for an emergency transplant. Patient is a 16-year-old girl who will die if Dr. Stern doesn't get there in 3 hours. Jacob felt his jaw tighten. A teenage girl's life depending on getting this jet down safe and fast. Then we better make sure Dr. Stern gets to Denver. Altitude? 500 feet, crossing the tree line now. How's your clearance? 70 feet, good call on that. Bleed off speed. Target 120 knots when you touch down. Airspeed 135 knots. Pull back gently. Let physics work for you. The nose comes up. The speed bleeds off. Coming back, 128 knots. Ground is coming up fast, observer. That's normal. Trust your instruments and trust me. When you're 50 feet above the deck, flare hard. Same technique as pavement, but you're going to feel the stubble grab your tires immediately. Don't fight it. 50 feet, flaring now. Jacob held his breath. The Learjet's nose came up. For a moment, it looked perfect. A textbook landing approach. Then the main gear touched down. The impact sounded like a bomb going off. The tires hit the stubble and immediately started plowing through, not rolling smoothly like on pavement, but churning through corn stalks and dirt, throwing debris in a huge cloud behind the aircraft. The jet bounced once, hard, then came down again. "Brakes!" Jacob shouted into the radio. "Everything you've got!" Through the cloud of dust and debris, Jacob could see the Learjet's nose dip as Fletcher stood on the brakes. The gear was holding, barely, but holding the stubble was doing exactly what Jacob had predicted, creating massive friction, dragging at the tires, slowing the jet far faster than pavement would. But they were still going too fast. "You're at the midpoint," Jacob yelled. "Keep braking." The jet was slowing, 80 knots, 60, 40. Then Jacob heard the sound that made his heart stop, a metallic crack as the nose gear collapsed. The Learjet's nose dropped hard, plowing into the dirt. The aircraft pitched forward violently, tail lifting, for a terrifying moment looking like it might flip completely over. Then it slammed back down flat, skidding sideways, trailing a massive plume of dust, and stopped, 300 feet from the western tree line. Silence. Jacob was running before his brain caught up, sprinting across his field toward the aircraft. Behind him, he could hear sirens, fire trucks and ambulances already racing from town, alerted by the tower. The Learjet sat at an angle, nose gear completely collapsed, the front of the fuselage resting in the dirt. But the cabin was intact. No fire, no explosion. Just a very expensive corporate jet with a broken nose, sitting in a Kansas cornfield like it had always belonged there. The cabin door opened. Captain Fletcher appeared first, his face pale, his legs shaking so badly he almost fell getting down the emergency slide someone had deployed. Then the passengers started coming out, all of them, one by one. 6 executives in business casual looking shell-shocked, an assistant clutching a tablet like it was a life preserver, and Dr. Rachel Stern, a small woman in her 40s wearing surgical scrubs, who hit the ground and immediately pulled out her phone. "I need a helicopter," she was saying. "Right now. I have a transplant in 3 hours." Jacob reached the aircraft as the last passenger evacuated. Fletcher turned and saw him. Overalls, work boots, John Deere cap, the farmer who'd just talked down a Learjet. "You're the ground observer?" "Jacob Brennan. You did good work up there, Captain." Fletcher just stared. "I'm standing in a cornfield. My aircraft's nose gear is destroyed. We landed at 120 knots on dirt, and everyone walked away." "Everyone walked away," Jacob confirmed. "How is that possible?" "Because you followed instructions, because you trusted someone who'd done this before, and because Learjets are tougher than most pilots give them credit for." Dr. Stern ran up to them. "Are you the one who guided us down?" "Yes, ma'am. I need to get to Denver. 16-year-old girl, heart transplant, 3 hours." Jacob looked at Fletcher. Your aircraft's not flying anywhere today. Understatement of the year. Dr. Chen looked like she might cry. She's going to die. Emily Rogers, 16 years old, cheerleader, honor student, waiting for a heart at Denver Memorial. If I don't get there in time. How far to Denver? Jacob asked Fletcher. By air? Hour and a half. By car. Fletcher checked his phone. Google says 7 hours. She doesn't have 7 hours, Dr. Chen whispered. Jacob pulled out his phone and made a call. Tom, it's Jacob. I need a favor. Big one. 20 minutes later, a helicopter appeared over the tree line. Not a medical helicopter, a civilian Sikorsky S-76, owned by Tom Willis, who ran the largest farming co-op in 3 counties and happened to owe Jacob for fixing his combine during harvest. The helicopter landed in the same field that had just saved the Learjet. This'll get you to Denver, Jacob told Dr. Stern. I don't understand. Who arranged this? Friend of mine owes me a favor. He's not using the helicopter today anyway. Dr. Stern grabbed Jacob's hand. Thank you. You just saved 2 lives today. 8 people on that plane and now Emily Rogers. She ran for the helicopter. It lifted off 3 minutes later, banking hard toward Denver. Fire trucks and ambulances arrived. Paramedics checked the passengers. Miraculously, only minor injuries. Bruises from hard seatbelts. 1 sprained wrist. Nothing serious. The FAA would arrive within hours. The NTSB would spend weeks investigating. But right now, in this moment, 8 people were standing in a Kansas cornfield, alive, because a farmer had refused to let them die. Fletcher approached Jacob again. The pilot had found his legs now, his color returning. Yeah, I need to know something. How many times have you actually done this? Talked down an aircraft onto an unpaved field? In combat, 306 times, counted every one. But a Learjet. First time. Fletcher's eyes went wide. First time. First time for a Learjet specifically. But the principles don't change. Aircraft is aircraft. Dirt is dirt. Physics is physics. You told me you'd never lost an aircraft. I haven't, today included. Fletcher sat down hard on the ground, like his legs had given out again. I was landing a Learjet on a cornfield being guided by a farmer who'd never done it before. I was an Air Force combat controller being guided by 12 years of experience landing aircraft in worse conditions. The overalls are just what I wear now. One of the executives, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit covered in dust, approached them. Are you the one who talked us down? Yes, sir. I'm Richard Calloway, CEO of Calloway Industries. I was on that plane, my wife, my son. His voice broke. We were all on that plane. He pulled out his phone, started making a call. I'm calling the FAA administrator and my attorney, and every news organization I know. What you did today? Sir, I'd appreciate if you didn't. Morrison stopped mid-dial. What? I came home to farm because I wanted peace, wanted quiet. I don't need recognition or attention. I just needed to make sure you folks didn't crash into my field. You saved 8 lives. That deserves recognition. Those 8 lives getting home to their families, that's recognition enough. But Calloway wasn't the only one making calls. Within an hour, news helicopters were circling. By evening, the story was everywhere. Farmer uses military training to guide corporate jet to emergency landing. 8 saved as former combat controller talks down jet. Kansas miracle, Learjet lands in cornfield, all aboard survive. The FAA arrived. Investigators interviewed Jacob for 3 hours, taking down every detail of the landing. They examined the aircraft, the field, the approach path. Finally, the lead investigator, a woman named Sandra Hayes, who'd been with the NTSB for 20 years, approached Jacob. Mr. Brennan, I've investigated hundreds of crashes. This was a controlled emergency landing in conditions that should have been unsurvivable. The pilot did excellent work, but he's told us repeatedly that he was following your instructions. He did all the hard work. I just gave him information. You gave him information that saved 8 lives. The recording from the tower and your radio transmissions, I've listened to it 6 times. You were calm, precise, authoritative, like you'd done it 1,000 times. Did it 306 times in combat. This was 307. Hayes smiled slightly. The pilot says you told him the landing gear would hold. It almost did. The nose gear collapsed, but only after the aircraft had slowed enough that it didn't matter. How did you know? Didn't know for certain, but I've seen enough hard landings to know that gear is designed to take more abuse than most people think, and I calculated that the friction from the stubble would slow him down before the gear gave out. You calculated that? Yes, ma'am. In your head, while talking a Learjet down onto a cornfield. That's what combat controllers do. We calculate, we assess, we make calls. We don't have time to second guess. Hayes closed her notebook. For what it's worth, I'm recommending the FAA give Captain Fletcher a commendation for outstanding airmanship, and I'm going to suggest they recognize you as well. I appreciate that, ma'am, but I don't need recognition. Maybe you don't, but other people need to know that this is possible, that training matters, that experience matters, that sometimes the person who saves your life is wearing overalls and standing in a cornfield. The news crews wanted interviews. Jacob gave one, short, factual, deflecting credit to Fletcher. Then he went back to his workshop to finish rebuilding that carburetor. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old friends from his Air Force unit, local reporters, national reporters, the mayor of his town, Richard Calloway's assistant calling to arrange a proper thank you. Jacob ignored most of them, but one call he answered, Captain Fletcher. Jacob, it's David Fletcher, the pilot. I know who you are, Captain. How you holding up? Still shaking. Keep replaying it in my head. Keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there. Someone else would have helped. Tower would have figured something out. No, they wouldn't have. I was dead stick at 6,000 feet with 15 miles to the nearest runway. The math doesn't work. We were going down, and without you, we were going down hard. Jacob didn't respond. I need to know something, Fletcher continued. Why did you help? You didn't have to. You could have just watched us crash. Couldn't do that, not when I had the knowledge to help. But you risked your credibility. If I'd crashed following your instructions, if people had died, you would have been blamed. Wasn't going to crash. I don't give instructions unless I'm certain. How could you be certain? Because I'd done it before. Different aircraft, different situations, but the principles are the same. I knew my field, I knew the physics, and I knew you had the skills if I gave you the right information. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. I've been flying for 12 years. I thought I was good, but today I learned that being good means knowing when to trust someone who knows more than you. Thank you for that lesson. You did good work up there. Your passengers are alive because you kept your head and followed through. They're alive because you refused to let them die. After Fletcher hung up, Jacob sat in his workshop, listening to the sirens fade as the emergency vehicles departed. The Learjet would be removed tomorrow. A crane would lift it onto a flatbed truck, and it would be hauled away for repairs that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But 8 people were home tonight. 8 people were alive to hug their families, to eat dinner, to complain about the coffee and plan their next meetings and live their lives. Because a farmer in overalls had picked up a radio and refused to let them crash. That night, Jacob drove to the Millfield Care Center to visit his father. Frank Brennan had suffered a massive stroke 2 years ago and couldn't speak anymore, but his eyes were sharp, and Jacob knew he understood. Had an interesting day, Dad, Jacob said, sitting beside the bed. Learjet lost both engines over the farm. Pilot radioed for help. I talked him down into the cornfield. Same field where you taught me to drive the tractor. Frank's eyes widened. 8 people on board. All of them walked away. FAA's calling it a miracle, but it wasn't. It was just training and experience meeting opportunity. He paused, looking at his father's weathered face. I know I never told you much about what I did in Afghanistan, about the Special Tactics Squadron, about the missions. I couldn't talk about most of it, and the rest, I didn't want to bring that darkness home. Frank's hand moved slightly, reaching for Jacob's. But today I used all of it. Every landing I guided, every crisis I managed, every calculation I made under fire, it all mattered today, and 8 people are alive because of it. He squeezed his father's hand. You taught me to know this land, to understand the dirt and the weather and how things work. The Air Force taught me to guide aircraft. Today I used both, and I think that's what you always wanted, for me to find a way to use everything I'd learned. Frank's eyes were wet. He couldn't speak, but he didn't need to. Jacob understood. 3 days later, Dr. Rachel Stern called. "Mr. Brennan, this is Dr. Stern from the Learjet." "I remember, ma'am. How's your patient?" "Emily Rogers is recovering beautifully. The transplant was successful. She's going to live a full life because you got me to Denver in time." "Glad to hear it." "Mr. Brennan, Emily's parents asked me to give you a message. They said to tell you that you saved 2 lives that day, mine on the plane and their daughter's in the hospital. And they want to know if you'd visit sometime. Emily wants to meet the man who made her second chance possible." Jacob thought about it. A 16-year-old girl who'd been hours from death, now recovering because a chain of events had led to her surgeon arriving on time. "Tell them I'd be honored." 2 weeks later, Jacob drove to Denver, met Emily Rogers and her parents. The girl was thin and pale but smiling, sitting up in her hospital bed, her mother holding one hand and her father holding the other. "You're the farmer," Emily said when Jacob walked in. "That's me. Dr. Stern told me everything, how the plane crashed and you talked them down, and how she made it here because of you. Dr. Chen made it here because she's dedicated to her patients. I just helped with the transportation." Emily's mother started crying. "Our daughter was dying. We'd been waiting months for a heart. When they called and said they had one, we thought our prayers were answered. Then the plane lost its engines, and we thought..." She couldn't finish. "But you saved them," Emily's father said. "You saved Dr. Stern so she could save our daughter. We'll never be able to repay that." "Don't need to repay it. Just need Emily to get better and live a good life." Emily smiled, tired but genuine. "I'm going to be a doctor, like Dr. Stern. I want to save people too." Then this story has a happy ending. The news coverage eventually faded. The Learjet was repaired and returned to service. Captain Fletcher went back to flying. The passengers returned to their lives. But Jacob's life had changed in ways he hadn't expected. The Air Force called, wanted him to come speak at the Special Tactics training course, share his experience, show young combat controllers that their training mattered beyond the battlefield. Jacob agreed. Standing in front of a classroom of Air Force candidates, wearing his old uniform one more time, Jacob told them about November 7-23 Bravo. "Some of you are going to come home from deployments and think your training doesn't matter anymore. You're going to be civilians, and civilians don't guide aircraft into landing zones under fire." He paused. "But the skills you're learning here, the ability to stay calm under pressure, to assess situations instantly, to make decisions when lives depend on it, those skills don't expire when you take off the uniform." He pulled up a photo of the Learjet in his cornfield. "This aircraft landed in my field because I refused to forget what you're learning here, because 12 years after my last deployment, I still remembered how to guide an aircraft to safety." One of the candidates raised his hand. "Sir, were you scared?" "Terrified. Had 8 people's lives in my hands, and I was giving instructions for a landing I'd never done before with an aircraft I'd never controlled. But fear doesn't disqualify you. Fear is just information. What matters is what you do with it." "What did you do with it?" "I used my training. I trusted my experience, and I refused to let those people die because I was too scared to try." The Air Force offered him a position, contract instructor, teaching new combat controllers. Stateside, no deployments, just sharing what he knew. Jacob accepted. He kept farming, still worked the land, still fixed his own tractors. But 3 times a year, he flew to Hurlburt Field in Florida and taught young airmen how to guide aircraft into impossible situations. He showed them photos of his cornfield, played them the audio of his communications with Fletcher, walked them through his decision-making process. "The mission doesn't end when you leave the service," he told them. "The mission transforms. You become the person who steps up when nobody else can." When that Learjet lost both engines over my farm, I could have just called 911 and hoped for the best. He paused, making eye contact with each candidate. "But I had the knowledge to help, and knowledge without action is just trivia. So I picked up the radio and did what you're learning to do here. I guided an aircraft to safety. Same as I'd done 300 times before, different uniform, same mission." 1 year after the landing, Jacob received a package. Inside was a framed photo, the Learjet in his cornfield, taken from a news helicopter. Below it, a plaque with 8 signatures. "To Jacob Brennan, the man who refused to let us fall. Thank you for giving us the rest of our lives. David Fletcher, Captain Dr. Rachel Stern, Passenger Richard Calloway, Passenger 5 other names. And at the bottom, in childish handwriting, thank you for saving Dr. Stern so she could save me, Emily Rogers. Jacob hung it in his workshop, right next to his father's old tools. Some days, when he was working on a tractor or checking his fields, he'd look at it and remember that afternoon. Remember the sound of Fletcher's voice, going from panicked to focused. Remember the Learjet dropping out of the sky. Remember the moment the wheels touched down and he'd held his breath, praying the physics would work out the way he'd calculated. Remember 8 people walking away from an aircraft that should have killed them all. His phone rang one afternoon while he was in the workshop. Unknown number. Mr. Brennan, this is Captain Amy Sullivan, Air Force Special Tactics. I'm currently deployed and I had a situation today that made me think of you. What kind of situation? Guided a damaged Black Hawk onto a ridge in bad conditions. My hands were shaking the whole time. But I remembered what you taught us in training. Fear is just information. Trust your knowledge. Don't let people die because you're scared to try. Jacob smiled. Everybody make it? All 6 crew members. They're safe because I didn't freeze. Then you did good work, Captain. No, sir, I did what you taught me, and I wanted you to know that. After she hung up, Jacob went back to work on the carburetor he'd been rebuilding for 3 weeks. The same carburetor he'd been working on the day the Learjet crashed. Life had a funny way of circling back. He'd come home to farm because he'd wanted peace, wanted to stop being the guy who made life or death decisions. But peace didn't mean giving up who you were. It meant finding new ways to serve. Jacob had learned that in a cornfield on a September afternoon, talking a Learjet to the ground, while 8 people's lives hung in the balance. He'd been a combat controller then. He was a combat controller now. The only thing that had changed was the uniform. And sometimes, he thought, the best thing you could be was the guy in overalls who picked up a radio and refused to let people die, because that's what heroes did, even the ones who just wanted to farm corn in peace.
Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe for more. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss it. See you next time.